Hello there, welcome to Across the Balkans. I'm Nafisa Latic, great to have your company. This week our focus is Serbia. Facing growing pressure at home and from the European Union, President Aleksandar Vucic has called for snap elections next month, with both parliamentary and local elections to be held at the same time. Analysts say Vucic is seeking to buy time, both to cement his authority and delay decisions over ties with Kosovo. This will be the country's third vote in nearly 4 years, but Vucic says this time Serbia is at a turning point.
Živimo u vremenima koja su teška za ceo svet.
We are living in times that are difficult for the whole world, in a time of global challenges, wars and conflicts, in a time in which it is necessary for us all to be united in the fight to preserve the vital national and state interests of the Republic of Serbia, in a time in which we will be under many pressures, both in our relationship with Kosovo and Metohija, and also because of other regional and world issues.
While the opposition says Serbia is in a deep political and social crisis, accusing the president of ignoring demands of protesters. For months, every Saturday, Belgrade has seen massive demonstrations against the government following back-to-back shootings in May that killed 18 people. Serbia has one of the highest rates of gun ownership in the world, and tens of thousands of protesters demanded better security and called for Vucic to step down. Right groups also accuse Vucic and his party of oppressing media freedoms, election fraud, corruption, and ties with organized crime, which the president denies. Vucic's call for early elections comes amid heightened tensions in northern Kosovo. Back in September, armed Serb groups stormed the village of Banjska, killing one Kosovar police officer. The attack was a major setback for dialogue between Serbia and Kosovo. The latest talks towards normalization again ended with no sign of progress. Vucic refused to sign an EU and US-led motion even after Kosovo's Prime Minister Albin Kurti was ready to accept it. Vucic is also under pressure to distance himself from his long-standing ally, Vladimir Putin. Serbia never joined the Western sanctions against Russia following Moscow's attack on Ukraine. Last week, Serbia's intelligence chief, Aleksandar Vulin, who is also known for his close ties with Russia, resigned from his post, saying he wanted to avoid possible future embargoes against Serbia. Vulin was sanctioned by the US in July on accusations of involvement in illegal arms shipments and drug trafficking. His resignation was also among the demands of the months-long anti-government protests. Let's cross now to Belgrade to get more idea on the situation at the moment in Serbia. I'm joined by Slađana Komatina. She's a project coordinator at the Center for Free Elections and Democracy. Slađana, great to have you with us on Across the Balkans. Now, we mentioned the massive protests we've seen every Saturday in Belgrade. So this is what they demanded, to go to the polls again. What's the mood in Serbia now? And how significant is this vote?
Before I start and move to protests that we are having here in Serbia since May of this year, I would like to note that in the last 10 years, we actually did have 6 parliamentary elections, and out of that, 4 of them have been early parliamentary elections. Having this in mind, it's not really a surprise the fact that Serbian citizens, as well as the politicians here in Serbia, are in this constant state where they are waiting for the new elections, and they have this pre-election tension. We do not have any kind of significant political communication between the opposition and the government in the last more than 5 years, and we do have a lack of trust between them. This political confrontation actually transferred as well to the voters, to the citizens of the Serbia. As you mentioned before, we did have protests here in Serbia. They started in May after 2 tragedies that we have here with 2 shootings in the beginning of the May, and those protests have been constant for every weekend until last weekend. On last weekend, we actually did have the last protests, And since the government actually failed to fulfill any kind of the demand of the protests, opposition shifted to the elections, and they started asking for the new early parliamentary elections.
Does Serbia have stronger opposition this time who can actually challenge Vucic?
Well, having this political landscape and the situation in society in mind, I have to say that the ruling party is still kind of a favorite for these elections, especially when it comes to those national elections and elections that will take place in Vojvodina. But in some of local elections, and here I will focus mostly on Belgrade, we will see probably very interesting electoral race, and it's quite difficult to foresee how those elections actually will unfold.
What would mean, sorry for jumping in, what would mean for Vucic if he loses Belgrade on the local level? What kind of impact could that have on the ruling party? And what kind of sign of maybe future changes could that be?
It will be a shock for his party. They are here in ruling Serbia from 2012. But since the last election, since April 2022, situation in Belgrade is shifting a bit. So I do not think that will be a huge surprise for him, but also for the opposition if they have a good result here in Belgrade. I would just like to note that we have two different sides of opposition here in Belgrade. We have one big coalition of center-left parties, and this coalition called Serbia Against Violence is actually kind of a product of these protests that we had here in Serbia. While on the other hand, we have several right-wing parties, and this right-wing part of the political spectrum here in Serbia is still quite fragmented. I would like to note here that some of those opposition parties from the right wing are a bit closer even to Serbian Progressive Party than to the center-left bloc, especially when it comes to the case of Kosovo and the topic of Kosovo here in Serbia. So in after-election period, we will have different and very interesting talks regarding who will actually be the ruling coalition here in Belgrade.
Yes, it's interesting that Vucic's Progressive Party have at the moment in coalition very far-right party of Vojislav Šešelj, that is known for international audience as a convicted war criminal. So what kind of signal does that mean that Vucic wants to send to international community and in general to the region?
Yeah, I think that with this new coalition with the Serbian Radical Party and Vojislav Šešelj, Vucic is only trying to optimize his result in Belgrade. This coalition will be only for Belgrade elections. This won't be a big coalition for the national level. And I think that he actually believes that those votes that Šešelj might have among far-right voters here in Belgrade will be important for him for this future allocation of mandates after the election. And I do think that he probably thinks that those votes will be significant for him in staying in power here in Belgrade.
And what is ahead of us? What kind of campaign can we expect before the vote in December? Especially, I'm interested in the situation with Kosovo, as that's the main thing that the EU wants for Serbia to do if they want to continue their bid. And according to Vucic, this is what Serbia actually wants. So what is the opposition saying? What's their stance on Kosovo? Would they accept an EU deal if they come to power?
Even though Kosovo is always a big topic here in Serbia and always important topic for any campaign, I do think that economy, living standards, and inflation here will be the key topics for any of the parties. As I mentioned, Kosovo is always part of the campaign, and we had this situation in Kosovo last month, and this will definitely be a part of campaign. In terms of opposition and their stand on Kosovo, I think that this is more important for right-wing parties. They always center their campaign around Kosovo issues, and most of them believe that this kind of situation and crisis on Kosovo is actually good for them. They can mobilize their voters with this talk regarding issue of Kosovo. Center-left bloc, Serbia Against Violence parties, actually are kind of avoiding the topic of Kosovo, but I think that none of the parties cannot bypass this issue in their campaign. Regarding the request from EU, I do think that any kind of post-electoral coalition, any government that will be here in Serbia after these elections in December cannot actually bypass this conversation with Pristina, and everyone will try to reach some sort of the agreement regarding Kosovo issues. But having all of this in mind, I do think that economy will be the priority for every party. Also, right-wing parties will definitely still focus on cooperation with Russia. This was very important for them for 2022 elections, and I do think that they will still push this agenda on.
Is this what's working with the voters? I mean, you and the NGO that you're working for, you're focused on following and monitoring elections. So is this what the Serbians actually want? Their officials to be in good relations with Russia, but also to continue its bid for the EU. What's the overall sentiment? How important is that, beside economy that you just mentioned?
Well, with right-wing voters, and I have to say that we have a lot of right-wing voters, and a lot of Serbian citizens actually do perceive Russia as a traditional friend, and they do believe that Serbia should have good cooperation with Russia. So this kind of messages through campaign could be successful for right-wing parties. I do not believe that the center-left bloc will focus on this kind of campaign. They will definitely push the agenda of protests and a fight against violence that we have here in Serbia, but also cooperation with EU. On the other hand, those right-wing parties that you just mentioned are against EU and cooperation. That kind of cooperation with EU, they will push agenda with Russia. What was also your question?
I just have 30 seconds left, literally. Just give me one sentence. President Vucic says Serbia must unite in these elections. Seems to me that that's not going to happen, that Serbia is very divided over the main issues.
Yeah, definitely. And this message that he actually sent was the message for his voters, for his voting base. He's trying to retain those loyal voters and to prevent any kind of losses when it comes to the right-wing parties, especially having in mind those situations with protests with Kosovo.
Slađana Komatina, thank you for being our guest.